Okay, Bruce. Well, thanks so much for joining us. It's great to see you again.
Great to see you, Jeremy. Thank you so much for having me.
I think I want to start on a positive note. I think everyone needs good news these days. Tell me something that you're excited about at the SOM.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be excited about always. I guess in this moment right now, one of the things that I think is kind of exciting and fun is we actually just this past weekend had our reunion and with the most recent class, first on campus in 3 years. But we also had a belated graduation ceremony for the classes of 2020 and 2021.
Wow.
So many of them are back on campus to sort of get the proper ceremony, the proper send off that they didn't get during the pandemic. And so I think one exciting thing, maybe not specific to SOM, but it's really exciting to see things, fingers crossed, are springing back into life, and kind of the life on campus is sort of returning more and more to normal. And just from an admissions perspective, we're planning for the upcoming year, and we're starting to fold back in the travel and the in-person events. So we're really excited about that. And again, that's not specific to us necessarily, but it just is I think, really exciting to see that happening.
For sure, yeah, it's great. It's great to hear that everyone's coming back to campus and that things are. There's that life is being breathed back into academic institutions. It's
Yep.
Definitely tough to do that with in Zoom schools. That's great. Cool. So I mean, big picture, like Dean Charles started his term in 2019.
Yep.
And obviously lots of static that occurred after that. But I'm curious if you could talk about what his imprint has been on the school, over the last couple of years.
Yeah, no, I think, and it's been big, and I think it's interesting because obviously he took over from Dean Snyder, who obviously sort of legendary both at SOM and previously at Chicago, did a lot to expand the school and our offerings and kind of diversify the things we're doing at SOM. And I think Dean Charles, it's an interesting sort of, I don't know, paradox or dichotomy, if either of those is the right word, but he needs to have a dual focus on sort of maintaining the momentum, but also kind of operationalizing and kind of the things that happened during sort of Dean Snyder's tenure. And so obviously that some of that happened, but really trying to make sure that the program's kind of mature and he's able to sort of execute on some of the things that preceded him at the same time that he's sort of developing new things on his own. So part of it is execution, but then also, for example, the Broad Center that relocated from Los Angeles to us at SOM, and managing that really sort of first-rate program for education leaders that we've taken on and incorporated into our offerings. Our new asset management degree. So those are some of the things that he's really kind of developing, I think, some bespoke programming that supports the mission to educate leaders for business and society. And I think that's where, as he has been developing programming and kind of expanding what we're doing even further and building on what Dean Snyder was doing, I think that's really, he's very focused on the mission and making sure there's a mission fit and an alignment in terms of what we're doing. So the Broad Center in terms of sort of educational leadership and asset management in terms of thinking about how to use finance for good. I think those are things that really we were, are very much in keeping with what SOM is about, our values and our mission. So I think there will continue to be development in those areas, and some things that he's done. For example, our new Office of Inclusion and Diversity, he kind of took some of the things we're doing, kind of rolled it up in a standalone office, and really that oversees all our diversity inclusion efforts at the school. And I think that's been an area of focus for him, and I think that will continue to develop during his tenure.
Right. You mentioned the legendary Dean Snyder, and I think I'm assuming that one of the most significant aspects of his tenure was the building of the new school, which is spectacular. And I've been threatening to visit for some time, and I'm going to blame COVID. But even though the building opened, I think in 2014, but I'm going to come visit you one day because I love architecture. It looks spectacular. It still looks spectacular. Even I would encourage anyone to do that. There's an amazing interactive tour on your website that is really cool. But we just talk about how the building has transformed the experience and how it continues to shape the experience of students.
Yeah, no, I think that it's a great question. It's interesting because we've been so because of the pandemic, we've been kind of removed from the building, and we kind of had to sort of step back. And there's been a lot of remote work, and we're doing things virtually. But it does remind us of the power of space and the power of sort of your physical environment. And yeah, in Evans Hall, our I guess not so new building, but it's 2014. It's not too long ago, and it still has held up. It's just when going to it or driving by it, I still get just as excited. So it really is a beautiful space, and you are obviously welcome at any point, and we're happy. We'd be thrilled to host you. This was it came to fruition under Dean Snyder's tenure. It really started actually under Dean Podolny, who kind of kicked things off, and really kind of a lot of the work happened under Dean Snyder's tenure, and then obviously the building sort of came into place, and we took residency then. I think it definitely has transformed the experience in some key ways. And before Evans Hall, we were sort of dispersed among some very lovely mansions on Hill House Avenue, which is right about a half a block away, and it was very Ivy League and a very nice, but very, I think, substandard in terms of the kind of experience and the classroom experience. And so Evans Hall really allowed us to step into the 21st century and be very cutting edge in terms of how we're doing things. And I mean, some of the ways in which that is, I think one thing, first of all, is just having a building where we're all under one roof instead of a number of different buildings. There is a very sort of unifying aspect to it, and it really does encourage community. It's the building. It's glass and steel, and you can do a 3D tour of it, which is great. But it's centered around there's a central courtyard, and it's the building is sort of encircles that, and it does lend itself to very much of a sort of community feel, which I think is very consistent with the mission of the school. I say that a lot, but I think it's true. And also just kind of the sensibility of Yale more generally. But I think even in terms of the classroom experience, we have the classrooms we have are all set up differently. Some are traditional kind of sort of theater seating. Some are kind of flat classrooms. Some are parliamentary style, so facing rows facing each other. Some are more of a kind of a horseshoe shape that are more dramatic. And the idea is to experiment with and explore different pedagogies. And I think the way that the classrooms are set up actually encourage that. So I think there are a number of aspects to the new building. And I think just metaphorically too, the idea of it's glass, you can see right through it, and it's meant symbolically to represent the transparency that we feel is important in management and in leadership. And so there is that kind of the symbolic aspect to it as well. But really, at core, it's really the lived experience has really heightened the community and heightened the pedagogy, I think, at SOM.
It's funny, like when you say like it's surprising the building seems so old. I mean, I think that's true of like any cutting edge architecture, because it seems like, I mean, when you look at it, it just seems like it opened yesterday. It's so beautiful and futuristic. Yeah,
it's true. It does hold up well. So and again, open invitation.
Yeah, I'd love to come down for sure. So integrated curriculum, like that's one of the things that I think of when I think of Yale.
Yeah.
But I think it's hard to sort of get a sense of it until you've experienced it. Maybe you can give our listeners or viewers a sense of what it is and what makes it stand out.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I'll try to edit myself and give you kind of like maybe the nickel tour, as it were, as sometimes say, although that's, probably maybe it's more the dime or quarter tour at this point. But I could go on at length, so I'll try and be brief, and if you have sort of follow-ups. But the idea, I guess the underlying idea behind the integrated curriculum is really an insight among the faculty that, the traditional MBA curriculum that was, founded maybe 50, 60 years ago at this point, was relevant for that moment, which at that point, MBA students would generally go to school, graduate, work at a large multinational corporation in a particular department, in marketing or in finance or in sales or operate whatever it was, and they would work their way up within that department, and really that was their career, and they had their area and their focus, and that was it. And MBA graduates nowadays have much different careers and use the degree in much different ways, both in terms of the variety of the ways the degree is used in general, but also the kinds of careers that really, it's not just working within a single company and working your way up so narrowly within that company or vertically within that company, but you need to have a better sense of how organizations work, how industries work, how the sectors, nonprofit, public, and private sectors are interrelated, and so our integrated curriculum tries to break down the functional silos that exist in traditional MBA curricula and teach you to think broadly and think across those functions, across those disciplines, across those silos. And so an example I would give, and the curriculum is taught, I think probably 50 to 60% of it is case-based, but we actually teach using our own raw cases, and I'll talk about that in a second if there's time. But the idea is that instead of teaching, based on, again, sort of marketing or finance or these silos, we teach courses that they're organized by stakeholder perspective. So we think about sort of the customer, the competitor, the employee, the investor, and all the parts of an organization that are relevant to that stakeholder perspective. So the example I often give is instead of a marketing class where you learn the 4 Ps and it's very much focused on a specific function, a specific part of an organization, our customer class will include sort of the marketing function. You'll learn the 4 Ps, you'll learn all the things you would learn in other traditional MBA curricula, but then it thinks about all other aspects of an organization that need to interact and influence the customer experience. So you think about technology, you think about operations, you think about HR, so things like, if you have a brick and mortar facility, what's your queuing structure? If you have a call center, what's the technology like? If you are, how are your employees incentivized? How are they paid? How, are they on commission? And that will inform and influence the customer experience. So it really is much broader, much more holistic, and that's the idea behind the integrated curriculum. And the last thing I would say is the raw cases. So it's about 50 to 60% case-based, as I said. There are other there's lecture, there are other pedagogies as well, excuse me. But these raw cases were actually developed by the Yale case writing team. And the idea is, unlike traditional cases where the case writing team will take all the relevant facts and kind of boil them down, reduce them to like a 10 to 12 page document that kind of drives you towards a concluding point or a single point. Our case writing team will do all the research that they would do to develop a traditional case. And actually the case writing team was founded by people who did do case writing elsewhere. But after doing that research, instead of, doing all the work to kind of narrow the relevant materials down to that 10 to 12 page document, the case writing team gives the students all that information, all that research, all the primary, it could be 10 Ks or 10 Qs or securities filings, earnings reports, media coverage, interviews with key stakeholders, all the kinds of things you would experience in the real world. And the idea is that in the real world, you don't have a case writing team to do that work for you. Part of the skill you need to develop is to understand how to sift through information, what's relevant, what's not, how to resolve incomplete information or conflicting information. So that's an important real world skill that we give you in the classroom through the raw cases. And so instead of having someone do that work for you, you're developing that skill yourself. So I think that's an important aspect of the experience as well.
Right. No, that's super interesting. The point about raw cases is a good one for anyone considering. Yeah, of course, the integrated curriculum as well. So let's take a look at the most recent Yale class. We have 349 students. 43% are women, 44% are international passport holders, 9% first-gen college students, 9% LGBTQ+. Are there any demographics that you'd still like to see increase? Are there targets that you meet with people at the beginning of the year? We want to get to 50% women in this class, or whatever it might be. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Yeah, no, I think that's right. And obviously there are no sort of prescribed or prescribed targets. We're not driving towards particular outcomes. And it's tough because it all has to add up to 100%. So you can't increase everything all the time on every dimension. Right. And so we have to sort of there are trade-offs, obviously. But I think in general terms, we do, the core thing we want to do is to bring in sort of excellent students who have the greatest potential to have the most significant impact, both at SOM and after they graduate. And so that's the core thing that we're looking at. It's really rooted in sort of the quality of the students and the quality of their background, their experiences, their candidacies, and what they will, as I said, what they will bring to SOM and beyond. That said, we are, I think you mentioned sort of 50% women. I think, I think as an industry, I think as schools generally, I think we would like to achieve gender parity. As some schools have sort of dabbled there and kind of crossed the line, even if just for a year. I think there are reasons for it, which we don't have to talk about, but there are reasons why sort of business schools
have been behind law schools and medical schools in getting there. I think it's still a worthy aspiration and where we would like to be. We'd also, continue to increase the overall diversity of our class in a number of different ways, and focusing in particular on, just for this conversation, not above and beyond other things, but on underrepresented students of color. We are a part of the Consortium for Graduate Study Management, and we have a stated goal. There's a sort of the 30 by 30 campaign is by 2030 to have 30% of our U.S. students be underrepresented students of color, to reflect the overall, U.S. demographic. And I think that's something, we're still behind, and I think there are obviously reasons for that as well, but we're looking to continue to make progress there. It's obviously we do that with, we don't want to, sacrifice any aspect of sort of quality of the culture or the community to get there. We're not going to, try to drive to a number just for the sake of getting to a number, but I think just kind of having gender parity, being more inclusive, I think are things that are positive goods and are worthy goals. And so we continue to work to get there. We also have been, continue to mention sort of 9% first gen to college. I think I think so we're around 10, so 9, 10, 11% on that front. We continue to focus on that and thinking about sort of, so opportunity and representation more broadly, and sort of the first gen and low income, the flyout population is important. We were a pilot member of the QuestBridge partnership last year with Stanford and Chicago. We've renewed for our second year this year. Excited to work with them. They do amazing work at undergrad level, and to extend the QuestBridge program to the graduate school level, to be one of the first schools to do that hopefully will be a model for other business schools and then for other degree programs potentially. I think we're thrilled to be a part of that process. And so that's another, it's tough to mention certain things because we don't want to exclude other aspects of our population in terms of things like sort of international students, and you mentioned LGBTQ. So there are lots of things we're trying to do, and I think that's where it's tough. You can't, again, as I said, it only all adds up to 100. So you can't do everything on every front, but those are some of the things we've been doing and some of the ways in which we're trying to manifest those aspirations.
So maybe this does. My next question was about GMAT averages, and maybe it does relate back to sort of the previous question about trying to track certain demographics, because there's lots of data that says that that higher test scores favor certain demographics over others. Do you worry that test scores are too high, that they're discouraging of some, 730 GMAT average at Yale, 166 verbal, 165 quant GRE average. Thoughts on an impressive average, but potentially a discouraging one.
Yeah, no, I think we're in, and I think when you look at which we do, when you look at sort of the GMAT and the GRE, together, because now for most schools, the GRE constitutes a quarter to a third, a significant part of their class. When you look at the sort of the blended averages, I would say we're probably top 2 in terms of test score average, which is great in some sense, and sort of speaking to the quality of the students, but it's also can be off-putting, can be limiting. Right. And we have, and I can say that, there are different aspects to this conversation. I and others have talked to GMAC about, for example, rescaling their test score or doing other things to try and sort of, because there has been score inflation over the years. And I think it's due to a number of things in terms of testing policies, in terms of, candidate preparation, other aspects. And I think it could be time for a reset as one possibility. But that only gets to part of the issue. I think the larger issue is, are some of the inequalities, inequities that can exist. And we have, to that point, we have tried to do more, and there's more we're hoping to do and planning to do to help understand context, that not every test score is created equal, what's behind the test score. And we do, and we do know that it's helpful, it correlates to success, midpoint success in the program, so success in the first year of the program, which is helpful, but that's obviously not the whole story. But it's also obviously not infallible. Undergraduate GPA is also relevant, and in our analyses, it can be even more relevant. the GMAT and the GRE are helpful in the sense that they are help, as the test name just says it, they help standardize candidates to some degree across profiles and give us a more of an apples to apples comparison, but they are limited, and it's not perfect, and their context does matter. And so, we talk about the role of the test. It is one piece of the puzzle. It's not the whole thing. It's not, I can't even say it's the most important thing. It's a part of the analysis. We talk about how we can, and we can talk more about this here. I'm sure there'll be other times or other opportunities to have a conversation. We talk about how we can, the context of the test score itself, and the context of the test taker in terms of how they perform and their sort of path to the test, as it were.
Right.
But we also talk about things like in other schools have gone test optional, or and have having waivers.
What about the EA or test optional, or
Yep.
the MCAT even, or have you considered any of those options to broaden things out a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about it all the time, and we've thought about it. We haven't gone test optional yet. We haven't accepted the EA. We obviously accept the EA for our executive MBA. We haven't applied that to undergrad. I mean, sorry, to people who are applying to the MBA as opposed to MBA. We only use MCAT or LSAT in very limited purposes of students who are already at Yale Medical School or Yale Law School, which is a very, very narrow subset.
Right.
We talk about when we talk about test optional or kind of going beyond the test. We've been talking about this for years, and the thing we want to do, and I think other schools are thinking about this and are weighing this themselves, is what evaluative structure or scaffolding can we put in place that would allow us to not to sacrifice the predictive power that the score provides, that the tests provide. We want to be at least as predictive, and while at the same time allowing us to sort of broaden the range of candidates we're looking at. So we continue to evaluate that, and we haven't gotten to a point where we are willing to sort of take the test out completely, but we're doing work to evaluate whether we can go farther in that direction without sacrificing the quality of the decisions we make. And it's not, and one of the challenges is it's not a simple thing. You probably have seen in undergrad, MIT just recently announced that they are going back to requiring the test, the SAT and the ACT, because they find that it actually adds value, provides insights that they didn't get, and it actually is more helpful to diverse candidates to have the test than not to have the test, because then they end up relying on academics that also have limitations and challenges. And so we know that it's not a uniform good. What happens for us and the concern I have is when you take away the test, you start to rely on other data points and other more subjective elements. Looking at that, when you look at essays and interviews, then you can reinsert some subjectivity in ways that are unhelpful. And so we're trying to be very thoughtful about it. Sorry, this is very long-winded.
No, it's fair.
I mean, to talk a lot about this stuff.
It's interesting because like I've often thought about that as especially with MIT at the MBA level, where they tend to be sort of a little more data oriented, and yet they've got a video, and you guys have a video component as well. And I often wonder about sort of the introduction of bias, particularly through video, which more schools seem to be moving towards. I'm not actually going to ask you to speak to that about video, but I did actually intend to say, in general, what are you looking for in the video process, and what role does it play for you guys?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's one we started with. We were one of the sort of early adopters of the video format, and at the time, we were hoping to do a number of different things. And as an aside, one of the things we were hoping to do was have it be using it to help evaluate kind of sort of data evaluation. This never came to fruition, but it was, we had some like slides that we were thinking about sort of showing, and they were kind of graphs, charts, and asking candidates like, what do you see here? What trends do you see? What conclusions can you draw? What questions would you want to ask? And they ended up being along the lines of what became the integrated reasoning, the IR for for the GMAT. So we ended up not feeling this was the right format to do that anyway. But at core, when we adopted the video questions, we were wanting to very basic evaluate English language ability. And at the same time we adopted the video questions, we actually eliminated the English language test requirements. So we don't require the TOEFL or the IELTS. And we thought that was a way to streamline the process, make things easier for candidates. They didn't have to take this other test they had to pay for. They would just do our 5 or so minute video questions, and that would be a lot easier for them. Obviously, the video questions themselves were new and novel, and they still, I think, create a little bit of stress and anxiety, which we try to allay by saying that they are not a heavy touch. It's not a heavy lift for them, and it's not going to sort of drive the outcome for us. But English language assessment was one of the main things, and then we have built into that, or sort of layered on top of that, other things we're looking for that get at our evaluative rubric. But it is that are sort of more qualitative, but it is a concern. I think there's sort of the bias. We were trying to reduce the bias and try and kind of minimize that, and then to have a component where it could reinsert that is something we think about, and we work on, and we continue to think about how much do we use this, how much do we rely on this, how much can it reinsert, because it is this visual, like, are you going to be drawn to someone who looks like you, or has a background that says, like, so go Sox, and yay, Red Sox, that's my team, or as opposed to if it said Yankees, they'll no way, so what's I just alienated all of New York, or for those of you, if it's more generally, if it's based on like your affinities, your sports teams, your whatever else, you see a bookshelf and you're like, oh, I like that book, therefore I like this person. There are lots of ways in which the video questions can reinsert sort of bias or into the process. So we will continue to think about whether to continue to use them, and if so, what guardrails we're putting around their usage. And I can say it is we do use them, and we try to keep parameters around the ways in which we use them, the extent to which we use them. They're not going to make and break an outcome of candidacy. We use them for specific purposes, and so just trying to maintain those sort of limits and those guidelines, I think, is going to be important for us to the extent we continue to use the video questions.
Right. Okay. Well, we stumbled into application components here, so I'm curious. Like, there's Yale has it's stuck. Got to be at least 7-8 years with one essay. Describe the biggest commitment you've ever made in 500 words as a maximum. There's a 250-word career goal essay in the application as well. But what would you say to the applicant who says, "But Bruce, I just have so much more to say about myself than these 500 words. I've made many major commitments, and that's why I feel like I'm in a position where I can apply to a great school like Yale." What would you say to that person?
Yeah, no, I would say I hear you, but I think we do try to strike a balance. And actually, one of the things when we implemented one of the other things we have in addition to the video questions, we have our behavioral assessment. And actually, when we had folded in these additional components, we actually went from, I think when I started, there were 3 essays. We went to 2 and then down to 1 to try and maintain a balance so that we aren't overwhelming applicants and we aren't creating more work, but we're kind of shifting the balance of the application. But I think it's true. Like, so you're reducing the number of essays and kind of redeploying sort of their time and our time into other things like video questions, like the behavioral assessment, like other parts of the application. It might seem like candidates have less of a voice, but I don't think that's the case. I think 500. So we do have you mentioned in addition to the 500-word essay, describe your biggest commitment, which we liked. We had for a number of years. We'll continue to use that. We worked with the faculty to develop it, and we think it's a good essay. It gets at a lot of things we care about. But then also the 250-word career statement. I think there is good room there to say something about you, something meaningful about you. And I am reminded, it seems like a small number of words. I think it's attributed to different people, but I think it was Thomas Jefferson when he was writing a correspondence to a colleague, said, "I'm sorry for writing such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a shorter one." It does take work to keep things to
Sure.
briefer. It's easy just to keep writing, and I think one of the shorter word limit. I'm not adhering to a short word limit as I drone on, but it does help focus you, and it does help keep you kind of on point. I think one of the things I hear in particular though with essays, I want to talk about why Yale. I want to talk about why the MBA. That's that's not the point of the question. One thing I will say is we do construct the application with thinking about all the stages of the process and all the elements. So, it's not just the essay, it's the interview. There are other and other aspects of the application that will allow you for us to hear your voice and for you to tell us about yourself and both academically and professionally, in terms of your aspirations, in terms of why Yale, and there are other points in the process that allow you to do that. So it doesn't all have to be in the essay itself. That's just one part of a larger structure.
So where does an applicant go wrong for you? You pick up someone's file and you say something like, "Oh boy, I have this person looked promising. Like, why did they do this? Where does that happen for you?"
Yeah, no, there's I mean, I don't know if it'll be glass half full or glass half empty. I could say in so many different ways, but I think there's no one way. I think by and large, applicants do a really good job with their applications, and I would think one of the things I would say is, it's a selective process, but we're rooting for you. We're trying to put together a strong class. We want people to succeed. We know we can't admit everybody, but we're not looking to be, unduly harsh or critical. Where we're humans who are making these decisions. It's tough to say no. I could say, and we're not looking to say no, but I think we tend to approach things in a positive way and trying to see the best. There are things that I think I'm trying to think of, like, there's no one way in which can't inherently go wrong, but I would say that a common theme can be, and there are obvious things like invoking the wrong school, say I wanted to go to this other school and you applied to a different one. That those are obvious things like that. But I think one thing that I see, and again, it sounds like a little bit like a platitude and kind of trite, but I think the people, it's kind of along in the vein of sort of be yourself. The thing I see people where they tend to go wrong is they're trying to differentiate themselves in an artificial way. Like, I need a hook, I need something that will make me memorable or compelling, and you can't manufacture that, and it doesn't make sense to try to really kind of like find something. I'm the so-and-so guy, like, this is my thing.
Right.
Like, I think if it's not happening organically, it's not gonna resonate, and it's not gonna seem sincere.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the thing where people don't trust themselves enough, or feel like everybody's got this special thing that's going to make them memorable. And I think really being sort of sticking to who you are, I think really does. And it kind of does sound very trite, just the be yourself thing, but I think there's some more deeper and more meaningful insights that underlie that, that make it actually really true. And I think make it valuable advice for people who are thinking about how to put together an application, and not to stretch too far, not to be too gimmicky, as it were, in terms of how you're presenting yourself.
Right, because like human beings are complex. You can't just be like, "Hi, I'm Jeremy, and I am an entrepreneur, and I'm going to be an entrepreneur in everything I do, and I'm branding myself as an entrepreneur." I'm not a brand. I'm a complex person, right? So I've got many different features. I think people struggle, like they try to oversimplify themselves to send a message to the admissions committee. It seems like that's the opposite of what you should be trying to do, as I see it, at least.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. And I think that in the part of a flavor of that too is people say, like, okay, this is the finance school because I'm going to be a finance person here. Right. This is the marketing school, so I'm going to be a marketing person here, and this is the operations school. And every school wants people with diverse backgrounds, diverse professional interests, and I think the more you stretch, the less, again, the less the pieces line up, and the more it seems kind of disjointed. And so I think that can get you kind of turned around in terms of your application. So I think don't worry about having to be, the right thing to the right school.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially because it puts you in a position of weakness. Like I was a speechwriter. If I'm trying to present that I'm going to be the next great hedge fund guy because I'm going to Columbia because they're a great finance school, whatever, I'm picking it randomly. It's like they're gonna be like, this guy's not gonna be as good as our other hedge fund guys who are trying
to. Well, that's the thing. Like, if you think, I mean, we sometimes get people who are, for example, I think we're a general management school, and a very strong general management school, in all sorts of consulting, finance, sort of marketing, tech, you name it. But we have this mission, and so a lot of school students and a lot of candidates think of us as the nonprofit school, which is not wrong. We're very strong in the social sector as well. But when I see people who don't have any sort of nonprofit or social sector experience, who are trying to present themselves as being a social sector candidates, like it rings hollow. It doesn't. If there's a reason why you want to make a transition from, say, consulting or finance, or whatever it is, to the social sector, to nonprofit, that's great, and you should be able to substantiate that. The analogy I tend to make, or have at times made, is to my past as a lawyer, is when you're a litigator and you are preparing a witness for a deposition, the first thing you say is tell the truth. And there are two reasons for that. One is it's the right thing to do, and the second is it's much easier to remember the truth. You don't have to, and I think it's not to that extreme. It's not like you're like inherently like lying, but it's like as you kind of shape your profile different ways, you're getting farther away from who you are, and that's never a good thing.
Right, for sure. So we see applicants every once in a while like beat themselves up about like, oh, I didn't get in, and there's not necessarily anything wrong. Like I asked you about red flags. There's not necessarily anything wrong with their candidacy. Like there's going to be you have a wait list. There's going to be a number of people who could otherwise have gotten into your class. I guess my question is, like, if you had from your pool of applicants, I apologize, I can't remember how many applicants you had last year, but if you could have taken an unlimited, would you have taken double the class, 50% more? Like where do you think the quality maybe starts to fall off? Fall off's not a fair word, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no. And again, it's all how you define quality. It's like if you're thinking about like according to traditional metrics, it's a good question. I don't know if I could think about like what sort of the replacement, number, as it were. But there are certain, it's probably certain order of magnitude. I don't know if it's twice as many that we could take, and would be, it would be indistinguishable from a qualitative perspective.
Right.
It was probably I mean, we get typically in sort of between 3,000 and 4,000 applications for a class of roughly 350. So there's more candidates that are qualified that we can admit. And sometimes it gets down to
expand the school.
Yeah, that would be the next step. But that's one of the reasons why I do say, it's tough to do this, because it's such a personal process, and people do take it personally when they don't get in. But what I try and say is that this is not a referendum on you. It's not as though it's not a commentary on your your potential or your value. It's just for our school at this moment. This is, we had other candidates, and they might not have been, materially stronger, or even stronger at all. But we were looking at, in addition to lots of the traditional things that other schools are looking at, we sometimes will tip in favor of things like what candidates we feel could benefit from our integrated curriculum more than others. So, for example, we look for people who have, are broad-minded and are intellectually curious, that kind of will resonate with the integrated curriculum, or who might have a slightly stronger mission alignment with our school. We're not looking to, we don't make decisions based on fit, because I think that's a very unstable thing to evaluate on. But there are some people who maybe are a little bit more aligned, and that might be where the tipping point is. But so it's tough to say any one thing is a yes or no. But it is true that there are certainly more candidates who are qualified than we can admit, and it's not a commentary on you if you are not one of the people we're offering admission to.
Okay, last question. You've been so generous with your time. Not to be too cynical, but I've done a lot of admissions officer interviews over the years, and everyone talks about that. We're looking for holistic individuals who are leaders, and individuals with global ambitions. Is there anything in particular that you can say that the SOM looks for in its students, or said differently, I guess, that makes a Yale class different from others?
Yeah, no, I think no, it's a good question. It's a tough question. It's an important question, and I think I touched on it just now in my previous answer. I do think, and it gets to, I think, the school more generally, we're really trying to be anchored in the mission to educate leaders for business and society. And we're trying to think about who is best positioned to fulfill that mission, and what does that mean? How does that translate to an applicant and their profile and what they're presenting? So like trying to operationalize that and make it concrete. And we do think, I mentioned things like being broad-minded, being intellectually curious, being able to kind of sort of sort of, as I think maybe the word was resonate with, align with the integrated curriculum and with the mission. I think that we are, among the other things, in addition, again, this is all on top of sort of academic and professional excellence in terms of your potential, your past academic performance, your past professional performance, your potential to be successful in the classroom and beyond. This is kind of on top of that. The other thing is, I think we're a small, it's an intimate community. It's a very supportive community. I think you'll hear that, other schools as well. We're not unique to that in that regard, but I think we do care about, who's in the community and how we're interacting. And so I think, people who are really kind of so oriented towards being engaged, being active, being sort of positive community members is something that makes a difference to us. And how do you do that? So we will evaluate, for example, are you humble? Are you self or other oriented? Like what's your we talked about things like the growth mindset. So how do you orient yourselves? How do you interact with others? So think about those qualities that are maybe secondary to sort of the straightforward classroom performance or professional performance, but that really inform sort of the values and the way that our community interacts with each other. And so I think those are some things that we care about in the review and we look at in the review to the extent that can help inform our decision making.
That's awesome. Thanks so much. I mean, thanks for your time. It's great to see you, and this obviously you're always candid. And one of the things that I always like to point out is something you said earlier on, which is that you're one of the nice people in this industry who's always just kind of trying to give people their fair shot, and that it's not as daunting a process as one might think it is. That you're not sitting there with like some sort of metaphorical cane ready to yank someone from the pool at any moment, but that you're really trying to give people a good shot, which I think is great. So thanks for joining us and sharing your thoughts again, Bruce. Really appreciate it.
No, of course, always happy to do it. It's always great to talk, and yeah, no, we're trying to help people in the process. So hopefully that sense came through. So I really appreciate the time and the opportunity to talk more about SOM.
I think you helped people today. Thanks so much.
Sure, thank you. It's great to see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.